Welcome, beautiful soul, back to the Womanhood Project podcast. I'm your host, Lizzie Morris, and today I am really excited to be sharing this interview I did with the amazing Ashley Winning. If you guys don't know her, I will be telling you more about her before we get started with the interview. But to just give you a quick housekeeping update, I'm really excited to be back on the podcast, but let me tell you, again, I'm here 2 months later after I recorded that episode with Ashley because the day after we did our interview together, my whole platform transferred to a new host. And just without getting into technical difficulties, it has been one hell of a journey, a pain in my butt, constantly trying to just even access the recording and listen to it in full without my computer acting bizarre has been a challenge. But I think I finally made it. I think I'm starting to learn and adjust to this new system. So with that being said, I think out of all people, I definitely feel the most like giddy about this interview because Ashley is definitely someone who, in this stage of my life, I do consider her a dear friend and in many ways a mentor of sorts as well. And to give you a quick bio on Ashley, if you've never heard of Ashley Winning before, let me tell you, Ashley believes that women are born with the strength, wisdom, and courage to birth and be the mothers that they want to be. She works intimately with pregnant women who plan to home birth or free birth by working through fear and mindset challenges while providing emotional support so that they feel heard, seen, and validated while taking the steps to intuitively birth their baby their way. Ashley is a home birth mindset coach and guide, a podcaster, speaker, and she birthed her third baby at home unassisted after two surgical births, aka C-sections. And in this episode today, we discussed so many things. In the beginning, we definitely are just going into life, Ashley's background, her life purpose, her history, or as we like to call it, her story. And we discuss why she created the VBAC village, which is really, really exciting if you're interested in the VBAC space. We go over statistics. We both shared some of our experiences from our previous births. We talked about why birth preparation and birth support is so helpful, specifically the right type of birth prep and support. We chatted about shame and guilt surrounding how we feel about our birth experiences. And to top it off, Ashley ended with a lovely mission on how we can help women around the world. So, this was definitely one of my favorites so far. I'm so happy to finally get it out to you guys. I really hope not only maybe you learned something that just helps you in your journey, but I really actually hope. This is a moment to shed light on Ashley and how just phenomenal of a person she is. I believe she has paved the way in the plus size, VBAC, free birth, any like so many different categories you could label her under where she has, really paved a way for other women. So I very much value her. I appreciate the words she has to share with the world. So I hope you do too. And without further ado, oh, by the way, before I end this, actually, if you find anything interesting in this episode, make sure that you tag me and Ashley on Instagram. Without further ado, let's get into today's episode. So, Ashley, I know you've been on the podcast before. There will probably be new listeners and people that may have forgotten, not listened to that episode. So, we will be talking about the VBAC Village and lots of different things regarding VBAC. And I mean, who knows where the conversation will take us? I really don't even want to limit ourselves because I know where we can go. But yeah, if you just want to introduce yourself, like who you are, how many kids you got, your hobbies, anything you want to say, I'm down to hear it. Go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast again, Lizzie. I love talking with you and chatting with you. And we get to talk a fair bit actually over the last year, probably, haven't we? And I'm a mum of three. I'm Ashley. I'm a mum of three. I live in Queensland, Australia. I had two unplanned, unneeded C-sections, and I had a free birth with my third baby. And I've been working in the birth space and postpartum space now since 2017, sharing my experiences and my stories and my wisdom and the things that I've learned, just wanting to basically support and help other mums who are in a similar situation as me. And so I've been heavily working in the VBAC space because that's my passion. But, there's been so many exciting little things like working in the plus size space, working, in the free birth space, like working in all these little areas and learning so much and connecting with so many other passionate women like yourself. And yeah, so that's pretty much where I've been for the last few years, and a little bit about me. I homeschool my two oldest girls, and I love to sing. So one of my favorite things to do in the world is sing, get out in my garden, sit in the sun. I love the ocean, I love swimming, and I love spending quality time with friends, just chatting. Yeah.
You do in-person doula work right now as well, or what? I've seen you talk about that, but I can't remember everything what's going on with that too.
Yes, I've just started working with women in person here locally, working with women in home birth and working with women who hospital birth as well. My niche is more working with women who are highly sensitive, or women who have had birth trauma, or women who have had C-section births prior and they're going for a vaginal birth. And then I've also started creating these beautiful digital products because I love creative work as well. I've been creating these beautiful digital products like VBAC signs to put on the door, like VBAC in progress. And I just got my VBAC, with that fist pumps, I just thought, why not like make this journey really special where you can have these beautiful printable products that don't cost an arm and a leg, but you can really celebrate the whole journey and have all these beautiful things to beautify the space, support you, make you feel more empowered. Been having a bit of fun with that. I've got my podcast, so I can always chat and have guests and have those sorts of fun things. And then I've just created the VBAC village as well earlier in the year as well. And then I've got my home birth group mentoring program as well. So I've got a lot of things to keep me interested, inspired, and ways that I can work with people. They can work with me, at a low cost entry point. They can work with me and do some birth coaching one-on-one, or they can work with me in one of my programs, or come and listen to the podcast. There's all these different avenues that they can kind of connect and get the support.
Did you ever think I'm so giddy over here because I love how ambitious I say we are because I feel your energy because I love just being on Canva and like making the stuff and like once you find your brand and you find your mission and you really are like in tune with yourself, it's so I don't know, the energy is contagious. So, did you ever think, I mean, not even like say VBAC specific, not even that, or birth specific, but years ago before you had your first daughter, did you even think you'd be doing all of these things like homeschooling, doing all the in-person work, doing all the social media work, having all these connections with people around the world? I mean, what did you even see? I mean, this is like so off topic. Like I said, no limitations. I think this is awesome. So, where did you see yourself in 26? You had your daughter in 2016, 2017,
2014.
in 2014. Where before then did you see your life just generally going compared to now? Like, how crazy or how different is it? Or if it's is it on the straight path that you thought?
I've always, like when I was little, I wanted to be a lawyer because I thought like arguing and getting paid, debating with people was like awesome. And then as I got older and I realized about law and what you have to do, and do I even believe in the law? Like all of those sorts of things. And then I didn't know what I wanted to do. And it's really interesting that you asked this question because I just came from the park with my girlfriend and my daughters, and we were just having this conversation about school. She was like, the girls need to learn this and what do they want to do? And I was kind of like, well, like, I've never known what I wanted to do in life. Some people do, but like, what is the meaning and purpose of life? Or what is it that lights you up? Or it's like really cool to say I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, but like, would you really want to spend like 60 hours a week doing those things? I wouldn't want to be a doctor. I mean, that's soul wrenching for me now, but in society, we hold that as like in higher regards, but it's not where I would see myself doing the most impact or anything like that. So I'm kind of grappling with the question myself, but as I was going through work, I've always worked in an office, for example, and I've worked in like corporate jobs, I've worked in construction jobs. I get bored after I've mastered something. So I would leave like every 2 years and go get myself another job. So I've worked in education and I've been behind the scenes helping students get into their login details to learn online in the beauty industry or the naturopathy, the natural health medicine. And I've worked in construction and I've done so many things, and I just think I was like, where am I going to go? And then I thought, well, I did a sales and marketing job for a little while as an assistant. I thought, marketing sounds cool. And then I looked at the uni degree and I thought, that sounds really crap. Like, I was like, that's not what I have in my mind about marketing. But in the last, I feel 10 years, the world really exploded. And so when I was getting ready for my wedding, I thought, I want to do event planning. And so my husband and I started doing like kids' parties and I started organizing people's birthdays. And I wanted to get into that. So I started doing like a diploma in event marketing. And I did that and I realized how hard that niche is and what people want to pay for. It's mostly like hiring things. So having like an event management company where they hire the tables and the sashes and you've got to do all the washing and setting up. And I thought, that's not really my cup of tea. And then we got married. And then when I had children, I had to stay home. So then I started I started a family daycare business so I could stay home and look after my daughter. I had no experience in that. So then I had to start training as a childcare educator. And I mean, none of these things were like, that wasn't my passion. That was something my husband recommended. But I enjoyed looking after the kids. I had my own little child. It was all little toddlers, like 12 months old. And then but then when I look at all of the roles that I've worked in and where I've felt fulfilled, what has actually fulfilled me is helping people. And it's the excitement, getting involved in like helping people. And so I'm whatever I'm going to do in life and wherever I was going to go, I was always going to be helping people, sharing knowledge, sharing wisdom. Even when I look in my workspaces, when I was working in the office, I was always like the leader in the office where people would come to me and I would teach them and I would train them and I would help them and I would support them. I'd be like that more nurturing person who would be more grounded and not the a-hole boss in the office. You know what I mean? So I've always had that empathetic, this is the way it should be. And I've worked for companies before where they weren't doing what I felt was morally right. And I have had huge problems. So I'm not one of those people that would sit there and say nothing about it. I would always get myself into trouble because I'd say, I don't want to do that. That's not the right thing for the customer. And I would leave places because I'd get in trouble for doing the wrong thing, but it was morally the right thing. I guess I've been on this journey of like doing what I felt was the right thing and listening to myself. And this is kind of, it's like this is where I've ended up coming. And while I love birth and I love supporting women and sharing the knowledge, really what I want to see for women, I want women to feel powerful. I want women to understand how to look after themselves, how worthy they are. I want them to understand the choices they have in life, and I want them to be well. And pretty much that's all I want for like the whole world. And so while I'm working in the birth space now, sharing this knowledge, and I'm super passionate about VBAC and vaginal birth, and I think that'll stay forever. I've got 3 daughters, so there's going to be a few births in my family, and I'm probably going to be present at some of them. And I've already been told that I might be a midwife at one of the births, which makes me giggle, you know, you're going to be my midwife, mummy. But, you know, I just love helping people. And I think as long as I'm helping people and making the world a better place, I think I've done my job here on the planet. I think I'm here as an inspirational figure. Like I'm supposed to show people if I can do it, you can do it. I feel like I am like that muse. If she can do it, well, the rest of us have hope. That's kind of where I see. I just want to uplift the collective to see that if I can do it, anyone can do it, sort of thing. So I kind of just see myself as that inspirational person, that just, I mean, I'm a nobody, like most people are. Actors, Instagram sensations, TikTokers. Nobody's special. Like nobody is more special than, we're all human. We all have the same things. Some of us have more ego than others. Ultimately, we all just want to be loved and we just want to be treated right. And yeah. So I think I rambled on a bit long there, but there you go.
Well, I could listen to it forever because, um, when you said, you always just wanted to help people, and even just the switching jobs, so much I resonate with that because, um, I remember I would take the quizzes online. You fill out these personality tests to figure out what would be a good job because all I knew is that I wanted to help people. Same as you, I pretty much any job I had, the main reason I left wasn't because couldn't stand working. Like they say the millennials just don't want to work. I think that within the world now anyway, older generations, younger generations, no matter what, that when you feel the spiritual conflict, we are all moving collectively towards like the greater good. And I can get all woo woo about that too. But just you talking about it kind of made me reflect on my past and how birth really was like the catalyst to make me understand that myself was always there, but it was hidden. You know what I mean? Like my core values were there. I didn't like injustices, right? Like it's like such a conflict of interest with our soul's purpose and what it means to be a human, and I think it just took a handful of generations of birth being destroyed and schools and this capitalistic society. And, like I said, I'll go down my whole rabbit hole too. I don't know where I'm going with that. I just really resonated a lot. I love talking to you about this stuff because we have a lot of similarities. And it's when you were talking about like just women's liberation, it doesn't have to be like you don't have to have traumatic births to like be liberated. I know that's where I got my where I found mine, and like I would assume that's where you found a lot of yours, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, not exclusively, but very much so. I had my first daughter this year, and you have three you have three daughters. So I'm having to like go through this re-parenting process. I mean, across the board for sure, but even thinking about like when she has her first menstrual cycle and stuff. These are things, that cross my mind of like, how am I going to raise her differently? I remember when I got leg hair, how my mom was like, all right, time to shave. And she hands me a
Mm.
razor and we go to the bathroom. And it's just this ritual that we've been conditioned to do. And again, not mad at her for it, but I kind of look back at that and I get a little sick to my stomach. Anytime we would have like these enterings of, or these rites of passages, you know, getting your first bleed, getting pregnant, then having those babies. How do I want to build a different future for my daughter is such a heavy question. But do you find yourself ever evaluating how we can build a different future for our daughters when it comes to just this liberation for women and overall just embracing ourselves from a young age?
I've thought about it and I went through a parenting journey myself and I continually think about it on a daily basis. What's the right thing? When's it too early? What's appropriate? What's appropriate now? What do I want to do differently? How did I feel when that happened to me? And I knew before I even had kids that I was going to parent differently than what my mum did with me, just because wouldn't tell my mum anything because she like my mum, what bless her little soul, she only knew what she knew or whatever. But I told my dad when I got my period. I didn't tell my mum, and I said to my dad, please don't tell mum. Like she'll be on the blower on the phone to her friends and telling them, and I just don't feel comfortable with all that. And I remember saying to her, I need more tampons. And she would say to me, what have you done? Have you eaten them? As if it was just, there were friends, I had girlfriends whose mother would like buy the pads and things and just put it in another room and it would be available for them at any time. They never had to ask. It was always there. There was no shame. So by the time I got my period when I was 14, but I started working at 14 too. And I started pretty much mostly buying my own period stuff just to save, having the conversation with my mum, and just she would buy me home brand stuff, which I buy home brand now, but being a teenager, I wanted the cool new stuff, whatever. Little things, that's a really superficial way, but there was a lot of shame involved when it came to that. And now my daughters, they know what a period is. They've seen me with my period. My husband sees it. If I had sons, they would see it too, because they're going to end up with a woman one day, probably. They need to see it as a normalized thing, and we don't need to see it as a shameful thing. And I grapple with like traditional roles. What is the right way? What is the best way? What works for us? What works as a society? Because there's a lot happening in this fast changing world. My husband calls me Frenchie because I don't shave my arms. So he calls me Frenchie. I don't shave my legs because I'm married, and like, my husband doesn't care. I don't shave down there either, because I get ingrown hairs, and quite frankly, it doesn't serve me. And my husband doesn't shave. Like, why would I be the only one who shaves if he's not shaving, and he's not shaving his chest, and he doesn't dye? Men don't dye their hair, women dye their hair, women do this. But there's a whole different standard of what beauty is when it comes to a man. Like, the silver fox for a man in their 40s or 50s is like hot, right? But a silver fox woman, you're like, come on, bitch, like, shave, dye the hair, go get your Botox, go get your facelift. Like, there's a different standard on women's. That's a whole different conversation to have. And I do believe in the rites of passages. And there are these things here in Australia called red 10. And so I really want to make it a sacred path for my daughters of, this is natural, this is what it means, this is what's happening to your body. And rather than looking at it as such a bad thing, I also think it can be a bit toxic, where in some of those groups, it's like, we should be like, oh, thank God we've got our period. This is like this sacred path of, sometimes it's not great having your period, 7 days, bleeding, pain. It is what it is. I'm really grateful that I get mine. I understand the reason why it happens. I think kind of being in the middle of, I understand the logic and understanding this, and then the sacred rites and that sort of thing. So I'm kind of sitting in the middle of keeping myself grounded and asking questions all the time, and listening to all different types of people, and figuring out, as I normally do, what works for me, because everyone has their own ideas, everyone has their own agenda, everyone has their own way of doing things. And often when I find out later, you find out that person that was selling their program or their way of life doesn't even live that way of life. And you've really got to be a critical thinker and think of what's right for you. And when it comes to critically thinking, Liz, I do want to mention, like, I think one of the biggest things that I stand for, and one of the things when we talk about injustices, like in the workplace, for example, I'd be the first person to stand up if there was a bully, or if someone spoke to somebody wrong. But that gets me into trouble as a person, to stand upright. And that's one of the biggest problems I've had in my life, is I'll be the first person to say no, to say don't do this. I went through the system and I advocated for myself. That's like the minority of women who's ever going and advocating for herself. I'm a troublemaker because I stand up for myself, but there's nobody else standing up for themselves. Nobody else is advocating or backing themselves. Everyone else is sheep. And so it's really hard when you live in a society of people who are sheep, who are led by other people, who quite often, by the way, are lunatics. They've got a religious agenda. They've got a business that they're spruiking from. Quite often, we've got the wool pulled over our eyes, and we're not critically thinking about these things. It's like every second woman that some rando on the internet that sees one of my VBAC posts will say, that's right, listen to this Instagram person rather than the doctor, which is a reasonable thing to say. It is like that. A doctor has a qualification and spent X amount of time as a doctor, right? So they have some social standing in our society, and you don't want to listen to any rando Joe who's got some opinion. But if you do a little bit of digging, that's where the real insight comes. That's where the real information comes. It's like everything that's put on social media and on the news isn't the truth all the time. You've got to kind of work out what the agenda is. Why are they showing this? What are they trying to do? When a government gives you handout money, they're doing it for a reason, because they want people to do a certain action. So, for example, here in Australia, for a while they were giving us money to have children. So you would get, like, every time you had a child, you'd get a few $1,000s. This is before I had kids, so I fully missed out. But what happened was all the girls from my school, they were having babies, right? And they would get like this cash handout and go buy these flat screen TVs with them or whatever. But what they were trying to do is boost women having children. And so I understand the logic between that, because people are going to go, I'll have a baby. I'll just do, the government's giving you an incentive. Whenever somebody's kind of giving you information, we kind of have to critically think, and then we have to listen to ourselves, like, what's the right thing? And do I have the courage to walk a path and stand up when I need to, and, be ostracized? And I think when we're talking about the birth world, I feel it's time now that we really need to wake up. And, when we talk about how am I going to raise my daughters differently, I'm going to tell them the truth. I'm going to teach them how women have been treated in society for hundreds of years, who the perpetrators in the world are, what they have to worry about, the injustices that happen, how they can get ahead in life, how their body works, and to back themselves, to listen to their intuition. Because even if I teach them something, that might be my perception, but they have to be critical thinkers to kind of go, as they grow older, like, maybe mummy's wrong. And I want them to question what I say to them, which is going to be hard, right? Because at the moment, I'm their mum and basically, I'm all they know. But as they get older, they need to learn to critically think and see the world in the best way that they possibly can. So that's kind of my role and job. And I can only give them the foundations to show them the world as it is through my perception, which I'm not 100% sure that my perception's right. I don't have all the information, but I can only give them two sides and go, this is what I think about this, and this is what I think about that. And there's truth somewhere in the middle. That's kind of how I see the world. And that's kind of how I go through the world. And I'm not going to lie, it's hard to go through the world like that. But I think it's the best way to kind of have your eyes open and back yourself for everything. Otherwise, how else do you have the courage to free birth at home, or to push for a VBAC when the doctor says, oh no, you need to be induced, and your best friend was induced, and this was, and your mum saying no? That's why women are just going down this slaughterhouse and doing what they're told, because we don't have the courage to back ourselves, and we don't have anyone behind us, so we just go, it's too hard. It's too hard. And then we teach our children the same. We're not learning anything.
It reminds me
And I,
how, like, for people just use that, like, it's just how the world is. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like, it's just like with anything, it's just how the world is. I'm like, look, I know I'm not God and I can't, like, just save everything, snap my fingers, but, like, I don't have to settle, or I don't have to tell my kids to settle for, mistreatment, because that's how the world, you know what I mean? Like,
no,
what a sad way to live life, you know? Did you have more you wanted to say?
no,
Um,
no. I just think about the world, and I couldn't. I just can't imagine. Like, I just don't understand. I couldn't have been one of those women that would just. But if you're stuck in those situations, you got to do what you got to do to survive as well. But I reckon I would have probably married a nice man who didn't beat me or treat me wrong. But you just never know. You just get stuck with what you're stuck in. And look, we do need people like that we can lead. The world is shaped the way it is because we need workers. And look, this is going off topic with the whole birth thing, right? But we do need workers, and we need people who are subordinates, and we need to rule them. The governments need to rule people. They need to suck as much money out of them as they possibly can without them knowing how much money they're sucking, possibly. And then they just like party and like, pay their friends with that money, and then they've got shares, and like it's a total. I mean, it's been happening the whole time. Before that, there was kings and queens that just come and take all your money and take all your food, take your husbands to go to war because his brothers slept with someone else, so we're just going to slaughter everyone.
Sh
It's just
this I
pure
just watched
madness.
I just watched the Joan of Arc movie for the first time the other day, and I feel you because sometimes I watch, like, just how women were treated. I mean, they're still treated whatever, but, like,
Yeah.
I just pray and thank God I was born in the generation I was born in 'cause I don't know how I would have done it. But some of the key things I wanted to, like, reflect on that you talked about, like, we talked about so much, but I love it because I'll tie it into the critical thinking, and I wanna move on to the VBAC village after I say these few things, but I think it's really, like, notable to, I mean, see how even your entry into, you know, what's the word? Just womanhood, I guess, like, when you get your first bleed or, when you hit puberty at 14 years old and just that getting that context for me, which I didn't know, so thank you for sharing. But moving on to the critically thinking part, okay, this was one of my favorite things that you talked about in the VBAC Village membership. So you guys, Ashley, she talked about it briefly in the very beginning. This is what this episode is really supposed to be about, but I'm glad we did a little bit of getting to know more about you and like our connections and what we view about in life. But this membership, I've really been enjoying. Well, I've enjoyed everything Ashley's came out with, but in the statistics part that you go over, this is one of the key things that I think really eased my mind when I was going for my VBAC. Most women, I just assume, don't think to look up the evidence because, like you said, the fear has taken over their bodies. They're over there, like, just going through the stress of being told, like, well, your baby's going to die if you don't do this. There's no time to logically think, especially if you're 36 weeks pregnant when you're in your most vulnerable state, right? When it's you, it's 100%. So I don't want to discount the tragedies that do happen, but they don't rule the population, right? They the 1 in 1,000, the 2 in 1,000. People don't know that. People don't know that how small these risks are, and everyone views risks differently. But collectively, if women had this information at the drop of a hat given to them this way, I feel they could just breathe. Like they would be able to be like, so like my baby doesn't have a 50% chance of dying if I go for a VBAC. So I just appreciated that so much. But if there was anything that you wanted to address, like as we move into talking about that, or um, what led you to even wanting to come up with the VBAC Village? What was the gap that you felt like you had to fill by creating the membership, and anything you want to share? Floor is yours.
I just had this. I just wanted to basically help so many more women, and I almost said save there, because I'm a bit of a rescuer. It's not my job to save anyone. That's one of the things I've had to work through over the years is, I felt really responsible when I first started working out. So working in this area and training as a doula and that sort of thing, women's birth experiences and women's choices and their outcomes are their own. And so what I saw, women are being robbed of the opportunity of getting the right information because they know how to manipulate women to control people. One of the biggest ways you can control people is through fear. And unfortunately, women love their babies, right? That's one of the biggest ways we can control women is by using fear of their beautiful baby that they're waiting for, that they're growing, that they're about to birth. They're so fearful of something happening. And this happened to me. But I can't stand the fact that I was lied to in my first pregnancy and I didn't have the information. And one of the big things, right, I was never going to invest hundreds of dollars into my birth education. I didn't understand the value. I would invest hundreds or thousands of dollars now to have birth support, pregnancy support, because I've been through and I've had, terrible experiences, but I was never going to see the value. So I thought, how can I get the information to people, the right people that need this information? And it's a no-brainer. Like it's $7 Australian dollars, so it's like $4.50 USD, £3 or something like that if you're in the UK. It is peanuts. It costs less than a coffee to be able to get the information. And what I thought was more importantly is being supported by a collective of women, a community of women, because we're so isolated as VBAC women planning to VBAC, or women who have had C-sections. In Australia and in America, only 12% of women go on to have a vaginal birth after a cesarean. So the success rates are higher if a woman chooses that she wants to have a VBAC. I don't know how the success rates are actually taken. Like, is it they're 40 weeks and they're like, yes, I'm having a VBAC? Or is it a woman who is 10 weeks and she's like, yes, I would like to have a VBAC, but they change her mind throughout that pregnancy and they only collected the women at 40 weeks who actually wanted to have a VBAC? I think that that's probably more correct, and therefore you would see the VBAC success rates lower. That's my intuitive thought. I'd have to look and find out, but that's my intuitive thought. Is I can't understand how women would be having 70% rates of VBAC when they're so unsupportive of women. And every woman that I seem to speak to who, before I started working in this space and just talking to women, they all seem to be like, yeah, I'm going to have a VBAC. Like, I really want to have a VBAC. And they all have cesareans. And I'm like, what happened? ETG monitoring, baby, blah, blah, blah. And I started to realize that a lot of women who wanted to have a VBAC, they wanted to have a VBAC, but they were talked out of it. They wanted to, and deep down, if they allowed themselves to feel it, they're feeling really disgruntled and upset afterwards, but they believe that was a life-saving thing for them and their baby, unless they're like in a VBAC community or something. So I feel like we've got this big gap. There's a lot of women out there who truly believe that they would have died or their baby would have died without the support, which is just not true. Like, it's just a lie. Like, I don't want women to be lied to anymore. Basically, here's the information, guys, that I wish that I had when I had my first baby. This should be available for women who are having their first baby. Like, you shouldn't even need to have had a C-section, right? This is all the same relevant information, but like, here is some really cheap information, cost you nothing, but the information's easy for you to read, to understand, to get it all in one place. It's fun. And so I thought, I'll do an experiment. I'm going to make it like peanuts. And I thought, we'll see what happens, right? I can always put the price up and make it a high, I charge much more money for it. So really, this is an experiment for me. I've got the content, I've got my program, I've got the women in there now. But this is my gift to women who want to take it up and want to learn. And so I'm just kind of just seeing what happens. And then, educating and connecting with women, really doing the things that I love, which is supporting women. And so having those monthly calls and being able to connect with women and provide that information. I'm working with women in South Africa, in America, in the UK, and they've all got all the same things happening in all these different countries, different policies and things, but asking them the same questions helps them think, I haven't thought about that, or I haven't consider that. And they really want to have a VBAC, and I can see all of the roadblocks that are ahead of them. And I can kind of like ask those questions, and they go, like, they'll get to 40 weeks if they hadn't had those questions asked, or if they didn't have that information, they'll end up in another C-section. And that's really unfair for those poor women, right? They're spending thousands of dollars on a chiropractor, on a doula, on this, on that, on this, on that. And then they're missing some key information that can get them across the line. And so I've been through that experience myself. I've asked those questions. I've asked them a lot of questions through my experience because I went in my second time critically thinking. And so I was just, I mean, I was anxious. I was very anxious, but I was saying, why? Why do you recommend that? If the information says it's safer for me this way, why do you recommend that for me? And what's actually happening? Like, what's the actual problem? And I found that it was the insurance, and it was that they're worried about their job, and they're worried that if it ends up in a emergency, they're not going to have enough staff. And that's not good enough for me to have a repeat C-section. But when I have that information handy, then I can make a different choice. Maybe I want to go somewhere else. Maybe I want to birth in a different spot. Maybe I want to hold them a little bit more accountable. Or maybe now I can feel a little bit more confident to say, no, I don't want to do that induction just to make sure you've got enough staff. I know that my rate of me ended up needing an emergency C-section might be less than 5%. I'm willing to take that risk. But I wouldn't have known if I didn't ask the questions. But I mean, it was really hard for me to ask those questions, right? Like, I'm
Mm.
asking these doctors these questions that they never get asked, that they probably not even sure the reason why they're suggesting these things. They think I don't need to know this information, but I had the information now, and then I was able to, advocate for myself and do those things and eventually go on to have my VBAC.
Something I wanted to touch on that I've noticed throughout the whole episode and just within, watching the content is that I think it's very obvious to me that you are supportive of like anyone's choice, right? As am I. If someone wants to have a repeat C-section, if someone if it's an autonomous choice, it wasn't a coercive choice, all of those things I think are very basic, then we support it. But what I've loved is that you don't refrain, as you said, from telling the truth about it. Like as you referred to it, what did you call it? The sausage factory, I think.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Like you're so good at being honest and truthful without sounding like you're judging somebody. But as far as like when it comes to just being honest about the medical birth community, I don't find it helpful to be neutral because that's not what it's not neutral. It's the truth. You know what I mean? Like you can't really be neutral about harm and abuse happening to women. A little weird to me, right? So I love that you don't live in a place of silence and that you live in a place of integrity. And that's one of the things I find is so different that you're not going to get bullshit. That's how I would like to be blunt, right? And the other thing is that you do these monthly Zooms. Like you said, we've spent so much time together the last year because you do these Zoom calls within your circles, and that is
yeah.
my favorite thing. I mean, it's such a blessing. I can't even describe to you the what it means to me to have the Zoom calls. I mean, truthfully, that's my favorite. And so for anyone that's listening that likes that close connection, that actually likes to feel seen and wants to feel heard and have a space where, you know, connecting with women all across the world and just getting to kind of realize you're not alone, because I think when sometimes we first get in the VBAC, like anyone coming in could be just had their C-section, right? And sometimes we have to
That's
take
right.
ourselves,
Yeah.
yeah. Sometimes you have to take yourself back to that place, like where you're in that, like when you're confused and you're like, what is happening? You're like, no one prepared me. I mean, your whole world is flipped upside down. And so if only I would have, like, we always say that if only I would have known this, or if only this, whatever, to know I had this space would have been so helpful. So I just wanted to point those two things out. It's so important, you know?
The thing that I love the point that you've just made about the Zoom calls, because the thing that I found when I was a new mum going into the VBAC groups, right? There were the free community groups, and you'd go in there and ask questions, and then there would be like somebody who was an admin, and abruptly say something back. Well, you don't have to do that, and you don't need to have an induction, and why would you do this, and why would you do that? And I was kind of just like, what is happening? This doesn't feel like a safe space. And so this is really a safe space, right? Like, it's about VBAC, but if a woman is exploring her options because she's trying to decide between a C-section or you've had a birth trauma, like, I remember what it was like when you come from that space and you're questioning yourself, like, is VBAC even safe? And is the baby too big? Like, the doctor said, like, when they pulled the baby out, it was so big, and it was a really good thing that I had a cesarean section. There's an exploration period, right, of where you're having to learn those things. And then when you find information, you can be in the pits of hell, literally questioning if you've done the right thing, if you made a mistake, if you're a bad person, if you're a bad mum, like questioning all those things. And it can be really hard when you're learning information about all the things that you did wrong last time. Like, you didn't go out to set yourself out to do this and say yes to that and do that. And, but you might say to yourself, I've done the wrong thing. I said yes when I should have said no. I should have known better. I didn't listen to myself. You might even not say that. You might just feel shame, and you might just feel guilty. You might just feel this pit in your stomach where you hate yourself. You hate the world, you hate the doctors, you hate your best friend because she didn't tell you what shitstorm you're about to go into. I went through all of that. I thought I was a failure as a mom, a bad person. I failed my child, this beautiful child that I love more than anything. I failed her. I had a C-section. My best friend said to me, why don't you fight harder? I would never have had a C-section. I would never, never. I was like, well, I never thought I was going to have a
Life
C-section.
will
Like,
humble you. Life will humble you.
it's easy to say that when you've already had a vaginal birth and you didn't end up in a C-section, right? But when you've ended up in a C-section, you never want to be there. And you're reading these things on posts like having a C-section is the easy way out, and that's not the right way, and that's not a real woman. That's some of the content I was reading when I had my first C-section. I felt really bad as a mum. Really, really bad. I've been through all of the emotions of, and then I went for a VBAC in the hospital, and then I advocated for myself, as you heard. I asked all the questions. Thought all I had to do was have a spontaneous birth. I didn't understand the politics and how they view bigger people and all. And then I got kicked out of the hospital at 37 weeks just because I didn't want to have a growth scan, and because they couldn't coerce me to have an induction or a repeat C-section. So they basically wiped their hands clean and said, oh, couldn't make her do what we want to do, so we'll just kick her out to the next hospital. So you can choose between this one or that one, but they'll be able to deal with you in an emergency because we don't have any faith in you. And so I found myself at 38 weeks at a new hospital, having to go to all these extra appointments. I was a nervous wreck, like an absolute wreck. And then I had to like stand up for myself again, and like, we want you to do a growth scan. I'm like, okay, I'll compromise. I do the growth scan, got a big baby. I know I'm having a big baby. It's no surprise that I spent so much energy and time fighting for something, and then I failed again. Like, in my mind, I failed again. I'm a bad mum, bad person. What's happened? Then I'm having to like relearn again, do all these things. I couldn't believe it. I trusted so much in my body, my ability to birth. But I let a few things happen in my birth that completely derailed, that I didn't understand. And so I have learned a lot. I've made a lot of mistakes, right? But I've also been through the birth trauma and PTSD, and I've experienced the horror of it all. Like, I'm talking like, all I can say is like dark clouds around you, can't see out of that dark cloud, like, pack my bags. I don't want to be here right now. I just want to get out of here. And you're not always in a space of being able to do the learning, but I certainly put myself out there. I was listening to all the podcasts, I was reading all the books, I was doing all the courses, but all I wanted throughout that journey, like, the information's helpful. It's really helpful, like the facts and all that. I just wanted someone to hold my hand and tell me, you're having this thought. That's okay. It's normal to have a human emotion. It's okay to feel like that. I'm not going to shame you because you're thinking about having an induction, or you're you don't know something. And that's what I found was happening in some of the other community groups. And then you'd have mums who were like years in their journey, and then they would be like, oh, don't do this and don't do that. And you're talking to a mum who hasn't even learned all. This is a vicious environment. You either kind of catch up and you go, okay, some of what they're saying is true and I feel okay, but you've got no like mentor in those groups, somebody that you can actually ask those questions to. There's no one really moderating to the same level as like a paid community, because you don't have to sit with integrity and things like that there. I think a lot of the groups now are pretty good. But years ago, I know that people would start groups and they just let people fight each other. It was like do you remember those days? It was just like, people like, they're adults, they'll get on with it. And I'm like, you can't really open a community group with people and not have rules, because you've just got wild animals running wild in there, saying the most horrific things to each other. So I remember that from my early stages of motherhood, and I thought, why can't people just like tell people like, these are the rules, and if you don't do this, you're not welcome in the group. Like, you've got to be a decent human being. So I know that a lot of the groups, I removed myself from a lot of the other groups, so I never see it anymore. But that's what I wanted to create with the VBAC Village and everything that I do. I am not a perfect person. I don't know all the answers for people, but all I can do is share my knowledge. And if I don't know something, I can only send people, like, I know this person who studies that, go find out, read their book. I can only connect people with the information and support, and then, at least they've got more information. That's a hell of a lot better than what a lot of people are doing, especially in the health system here in Australia. When you go public, when they're spouting off, if you have a rupture, you're going to die. Well, that's not true. That's not even true. Like, why would you say that? Like, but they're not sitting down and having a proper consult. They've got like a 10-minute window to see a woman, check her blood pressure, get the tests that she needs to have done, and check her baby with an ultrasound or something like that. And that's it. And so there's no real educational support unless you've got continuity of care and you've hired a proper OB or a midwife, and you're seeing someone. I know that the system's a bit different there in America, Lizzie, where you guys are on the, you have to have insurance, and then you're stuck with these care providers will take you with whatever insurance model you've got and that sort of thing. But we're not coming in there feeling like we're the client and we get to pick and choose who we want and we're in the position of power. It's just like, who will take me? I'll just take whoever will take me, and I'll just do whatever you tell me to do, and that's it. Basically, I'm kind of switching the roles of like, I think we should be in a respectful relationship with our healthcare providers, but I think that women should be at the leading front, and we should be in open communication. And that's the other thing. Like, people comment on posts and they're like, don't listen to the doctor. And it's like, I'm not saying don't listen to a doctor. I'm saying have a conversation, ask questions, and like get them to do the work for you. Because if they suggest something, then ask them for the evidence and have a conversation and get them to work for you. They've got all the education, so just put it back on them. And I did. I said, can you print that off for me? Can you show me where it is? I had a obstetrician tell me that I had a 7% rupture rate with my special scar, and that I said, well, can you show me the evidence? She said, I don't have it. And I said, well,
Of
it's
course
not
you
true
don't.
then. No. I said, well,
Like, as
why do
if
you say that?
right, like, they act like they you know, they act like they have a binder full of this stuff, but,
No.
when in reality, we should come in with it and be like, "Well, on
Yeah.
page 32."
I did, Lizzie. I printed out all of the guidelines. So in my state, I printed out the state guidelines for obesity, for VBAC, for gestational diabetes, and I went in there and I showed them all of the guidelines, and I'd read through all of them, and they said to me, "Oh, we don't use those. We use the UK ones at that hospital." And I said, "Okay, well, can you print those off for me and I'll have a look?" And they were exactly the same. I was like, I was
Literally.
like, I was like,
I
well, how's it any
mean,
different?
the
When I
critical
went,
thinking skills.
yeah, or when I went through it, it wasn't actually about VBAC. It was about obesity and how they treat obese people and how they do this, but they will treat VBAC the same anyways. And it's all a staffing sort of policy and issue. But going back to that obstetrician, that was a really interesting conversation that I had with her, because I said to her, so if I went to another obstetrician and they told me something different, how would you feel about that? And she said, well, that would be risky because I'm telling you that you shouldn't have a vaginal birth. And I said to you, so what, you're the number one obstetrician in the world. And if anyone else has a different opinion to you, then they're the naughty obstetrician because you're the best obstetrician in the world. Like, what the hell? Like, she's like, I think you're just going to find somebody who will support you no matter what, and there'll be risks. And so it's really important to understand, why was she saying that to me? Now, this obstetrician that I saw was apparently a very vaginal birth supportive obstetrician, which is why I saw her. And this was after my second C-section. But she was supportive, but she wasn't exactly supportive for someone of my size. So if I was a skinny person, she probably would have said something completely different. And so you've really got to look at yourself as an individual and understand why they're giving you that information. It could be the color of your skin. It could be how much, what job your husband has. I've worked with sales consultants. I used to work because I've worked in so many jobs. I feel like one of those, I feel like I could just live my life, working all these jobs and seeing how I love learning about people. But I used to work with this really flash sales consultant. She lived in a penthouse and drove this really expensive car. And she said to me, people would come in to buy these homes, and she would always oh, what do you do? Because she's trying to indicate, can they afford it, sort of thing. And they weren't expensive apartments. A middle-aged, middle income person could have bought the apartments. But if she got an accountant or a doctor come through, oh, she loved it, money, in her mind. And then she told me this story about, this is off topic, but she told me this story about this, someone had done something horrible to her children, and he was a babysitter, and he was studying to be a doctor. And I thought, so you view people still to this day based on what they do, what job status they kind of have, versus who they are as a person, even though that person has done a wrong thing. It's really interesting. I know we're going into a completely different topic here, but human behavior, bias and judgments, and how women will be treated, I think a lot of the time is, through profiling of lower, if you're a lower socioeconomic person, how you'll be treated by a prestige doctor or somebody who has money. If you're a woman of color, they're going off of the data that's biased and probably has nothing to do with your biology, but everything to do with how they treat people of that color. Same as people who are bigger, how they may treat you. And
Mm.
I thought I might be safe with somebody who was a little bit chubbier, a doctor who was chubbier, but she had fat bias. She hated herself for being chubby. So she was number one, hated fat
Yes.
people too, because she herself obviously had found maybe she'd been treated differently because she was bigger, So it's really interesting when you start to see how the world works. And, if I'd known all of that information when I went in as a first mom, if I'd just done a little course like I'm offering here, right, a bite size, easy to consume, which I think all women in school should be learning before they go have a kid. Yeah, actually, I would have made a few different choices in my life, saved myself the heartache of the anxiety and the birth trauma and the PTSD and almost, not wishing I was here. And, you know, imagine what difference I could have had with my beautiful daughters if I wasn't living with a cloud over my head. I was robbed of, some beautiful experiences. And I know many other women are, and they'll be 70 years old still thinking they had this life-saving surgery or forceps and episiotomy and all these things that they didn't need to have because they didn't have the basic information and knowledge.
All my providers, they've all been women, and they were the ones who I would say I've had the worst experience with. However, a lot of the things you pointed at, oh, also plus size. And that's why I was, people didn't see, but I was over here pointing yes, because the doctor who, one of the doctors who told me my son would die from uterine rupture was, I mean, she was she was a hefty woman, and she was also a woman of color. And you would just think, like, I've heard stories of women of color hiring another woman of color provider, and then thinking like, this is someone I can trust, and being bamboozled. I really have learned trust is earned. End of story. I would
Yeah.
never want someone to ever just trust me. Don't trust anything I just say. I am not God. I've thought about this a lot, how when I when I was going for my free birth, I mean, I think I always knew I was going to have that free birth. But one of the things that kind of kept me from even really continuing to look into midwives, I looked into one that was just, she was a little too far. She was really cool. We talked on the phone, very much vibed. I would have probably enjoyed her being there. But the more I thought about it, I was like, there's no way in my mind, because I've been down this road before. But there's no way I would ever be able to get to know this woman enough and trust her enough and know, like, how could we build such a soul connection within a matter of months? Because I was already 18 weeks or something like that, to the point where felt like I could include her in such a sacred moment. And again, there's no shame or judgment. I'm just explaining my own lived experience and the thoughts that have gone through my mind. But I've even thought about it with all of my other births, right? Like how I hired a midwife that I knew nothing about her. Really took the advice. I mean, I took a good review from someone who had no similarities to me, someone who had never had a C-section. I've really come to understand trust how important trust is when building your birth team. And your birth team does not have to be, it could be anything you want it to be, right? But it doesn't have to just be in person. It doesn't just have to be a midwife and a doula. My birth team, what it looked like when I was going for my last free birth, you were a part, I mean, you were absolutely a part of my birth team. I might not have been texting you when I was in labor, but you were in preparation for my birth. Like, you were this part of this team that I,
Yeah.
created for myself. What I've come to realize is just the same as when I took a recommendation from a provider, or for a provider from someone who has no lived experience similar to mine. Um, it's really important to look at the people you're taking advice from, And so anyway, my point is that I think people underestimate like what birth support actually looks like.
I think when it comes to like people, right, we can't expect perfection from people or for people to be everything that we need from them. But if we can kind of see people for who they are and we understand what their perception is and their experiences are, like with my GP, for example, she's what I would consider a high intervention GP, where she'll like write all of the if there's something that she thinks could be askew, she'll write all of the checks to get done and she'll push all the buttons for me to go get them done for free through Medicare. Whereas another doctor might be like, meh, can't be bothered, it'll be fine if there's any other problems. Now there's two problems with that, right? You have the doctor who's like, meh, whatever. So they're probably not being thorough enough. Well, she's being super thorough. So then if you take her advice and you do what she wants, you've got to do like all of these tests. But at least then you can get cleared. You either get, yes, we've got the bad thing, or we don't have the bad thing. Or you have the doctor who's like, most of the time it's fine, don't worry about it. But if you have the understanding that that's how your doctor's working and you've got a higher intervention doctor, and if you have enough ability and skill to ask her, like, how likely is it that this is this? And, what do you want to do? Then you can make an informed decision at that point in time to take her up on her offer and go do all the scans and the tests and whatever, or just leave it and see how you feel and worry about it later. But I know that about her, and I would prefer to have somebody who is thorough than somebody who's going to miss something, because I wouldn't want to like find out too late that I've got cancer, right? Absolutely wouldn't want that to happen. But I know how she works and I can ask her those questions. We have that relationship where she knows where I'm at. She knows that I free birthed my last baby, right? She said to me, look, I'll support you through pregnancy. If you're going to have another one, you're going to free birth. She wants me to have another baby. She knows how big I am, all this sort of stuff. She's size inclusive. She knows I've been trying my whole life to lose weight. She knows my story. We might not be on 100% the page that we're on, right? And we've had our problems over the years, let me tell you that. When I had my VBAC, my second baby, she was not supportive. She was just in the infancies of being a doctor, and she was a new mum herself, and she couldn't have a vaginal birth because she'd had a car accident. So she was going to this hotel with an obstetrician. She was having a C-section, and she was like laying up in this hotel, and she was all, I've got to have a C-section. So for her, vaginal birth was never an option. So she never had to go through the same path as me. But I stuck with her. I stopped seeing her for a while I was healing and stuff, but we came back together, and she's grown and I've grown, and we've got that relationship of 10 years together, 9 or 10 years together. She knows that I'm going to have a free birth. She knows that she can't push me to go do what she wants me to do or what she thinks is the right thing to do. And she even said to me at one point I saw a baby die in hospital because the mum refused help and care. And I can sit back and say, but that's your trauma. You know what I mean? Like, I love you. You're my doctor, but that's my trauma. And she respects me enough to say, Ashley's a free birth and hippie, homeschooling mum, but I respect you anyways. You know what I mean? And that's the kind of care provider that we want to be working with. And you can't build that relationship overnight, of course. We've been together for 10 years now. But in birth, unfortunately, you are going to be thrown into the hot sizzling pan where you've got to find somebody and make some connections. So you want to ask the right questions quickly and find somebody that suits you, and find someone who's at least supportive, not just tolerant or whatever it is, but be able to identify what those red flags are so you can go get yourself the right support and give yourself the best chance at finding somebody who will support you in a hospital environment or a birth center or at home or something like that. And so those are some of the things that I go through that I think are different from all of the other courses. I've done a lot of courses, but all of the programs and courses I've done, those are the missing pieces that I personally wasn't taught in any of those courses, that I've had to learn the long way. We're talking about, I said to my girlfriends, we're talking about birth positions, and we're talking about there's a new course now that doulas are learning. It's like, get your body in shape so you can birth the right way. We're wasting all this precious time doing all this. Women are focusing on the wrong things when it comes to birth, and they're setting themselves up for failure. And they come to me afterwards and they say to me, I did all the things. I invested in a doula. I did the chiropractor. I did all this, and I still had a C-section. I think, yeah, you did, because you're focused on the wrong things. It's not your fault. You spent thousands of dollars. You're disappointed and you're depressed now. Not your fault. I've done it before as well. But we're failing women because we're not talking about the right things. We're just wasting time, and we're not actually like propping women up to actually do the right things, which I share a lot of it in there, and I will be sharing a lot more through like some of the mini trainings that I do as well, and also through some of the conversations. But unless you have that continuity of care and you've got a guide or a mentor that you can have those conversations with, and ask those questions with, and get that support so you can actually go out there and feel more confident and ask those questions, because that's a scary thing to do. So pretty much that's what the VBAC Village is about. The headline on the sales page is take back control of your birth journey. So it really is speaking to women who want to take back control of their birth journey. They want to be in the driver's seat. They might be people pleasers, but you still got that fire burning inside where you're like still willing to ask the question or still willing to say yes to yourself, rather than just sit back and take the passenger seat and just be told what to do.
I love that you and your doctor have that relationship and that you shared that. But having the VBAC village as this space that this could be a part of your birth. I mean, I don't know. Does that seem like too far off to say like this could be a part of your birth team, as far as like obviously if someone wants you as a doula or something, there's other services. But I mean, like, to me, when I think of it, I really see like my women, my friends, all the women I had on my close friends story that I still have that I shared my pregnancy with. I'm like they were some multiple of my friends had guest no, it wasn't my due date. But guess the day I had my baby, like before, because
Mm,
but I felt like I had curated a I don't know, I was intention. I think that's a really, really good
yeah.
word. Like, I think maybe we can start to end off here is that's why I like to say how invaluable this is because it's hard to find people that vibe with you and respect especially even though we've talked about hospitals and all and births and all this midwives and stuff. I mean, me and you both had free births. More women are having free births because the birth system's so messed up and we can't change it from the inside out. And so the biggest fear besides going through that whole like, oh, is my baby gonna die scenario is this like, am I gonna get ostracized and have nobody in my community be there for me if something bad happens? And so what I've heard Emily Saldea say before on her podcast is like for her community, she said, we can't prevent any trauma from ever happening. We can't prevent stillborn. We can't prevent anything. But if something happens, bad or good, we can be that cushion that just helps soften the landing a little bit. And that's where, we've said it so many times, but I think that's where this makes the big difference is like knowing you can lean on a place that you're going to be respected, that you're going to be loved on, and you're going to be told the truth. And it's just invaluable these days. So, obviously, this is a membership. I mean, I paid for the year, you guys. I don't know if y'all know that. So I don't know if that's still an option, but like, hello. So anything you want to mention to people where they can find all this and how they can access everything?
Yeah, so as I was saying to Lizzie before we started this, I wanted to give you guys a gift. So if you want to join the VBAC Village, I'm not disclosing what the actual gift is, but all you have to say is when you join, just come and DM me. So if you would like to join the VBAC Village or you would like to work with me, I'm offering anyone who's listened to this podcast to say you found me through Lizzie, and that's the code word. And then I'm going to be offering you guys a gift. But please do come and join the VBAC Village. It's a great space for you to find your community if you're a VBAC mama. And, it's such an affordable push point. And then you can build that relationship. Program, but I'm running it live soon, but I've got an evergreen sitting there and we do our monthly calls and that sort of thing as well. So just join the village or come and DM me and then let me know that you've come from Lizzie. But it's easier just to come and speak to me and say, hey, I found you on Lizzie's podcast and I'd like to join the village, and and then I can make sure that you get your special gift as well.
Yes, I totally forgot you mentioned that when you like my jaw dropped. So yes, guys, I will have all of Ashley's information. I mean, you go down to the show notes. If you follow me on Instagram, I've been tagging her in my stories, and I'll probably have a highlight on my Instagram for the VBAC Village as well. Ashley, I have loved this conversation. I know there was so much like random stuff we covered, but I think tying it all in, it's really awesome to building that trust factor. Right now, people have gotten to know, like, you homeschool, you have three daughters, the upbringing, pieces of your upbringing, pieces of your birth, pieces of what you feel about the world. I mean, all of it, it's how we build trust. It's how we, build connection. And so I'm really glad that not only I got to know you better, but so does everyone else. I'll close my last thoughts with this is that one of the things I remember feeling in my C-section was how alone I felt in a room full of people. I've used that to describe because that was the most like painstakingly obvious, almost outer body experience, that I had where I mean, I'm surrounded by people, but I am by myself. And not to like throw the childhood trauma bus, but like it kind of felt like that growing up too. Like I had a big family, but it's like that black sheep moment. And so it's kind of fun when all the black sheep kind of start to hang out, and that's what I found particularly in this journey of connecting with birth workers and people that have went through birth trauma or,
Mm. But I
it's
find that people like it's not just about birth either. It's like I just have this like message coming through to me now. It's like it doesn't matter if you're like black, if you're white, if you're Muslim, if you're Christian, if you're fat, if you're skinny, it doesn't matter who you are or what experience you've had, right? Like I love you no matter what, right? And I'm going to be your biggest advocate and biggest support no matter who you are. And I might not understand your journey 100%. Like I might not have walked your path or whatever, but I want to learn about you and I want to learn about your experiences and I want to hear the things that are happening and I want to cheerlead you on and I want the women and I have this vision of like women cheerleading each other on regardless of not have walked the same path or whatever because I want people from all over the world, different walks of life, and I want to see women championed by other women and for them to have to say yes themselves and like go out there and do the thing that they want to do. And the knock-on effects from the birth is, that you're being able to choose these other things in your life. And that's what me saying yes to home birth is, a homeschool is, right? I'm not homeschooling because I'm, radicalized and in this free birth world or anything. I don't think that people should be everyone should homeschool or everyone should free birth or whatever. I just think that everyone needs to choose what's right for them and then we can have conversations about it. Like I had a chat with my friend about her boys are going to mainstream school and I'm like, well, tell me about it. What do you think? What do you think about this? And she'll say, what do you think about that? And it's just about learning from each other and taking a little bit. Maybe I should do a little bit more of that. Maybe she does have a point and maybe I could do a bit more of that. And nah, I don't really agree with that. So I'm not going to do that. But it's just pick and choose and be the best version of yourself and then uplift yourself. But who do you want to be in like 20, 30 years? Do you want to be somebody who said yes to life and did everything they possibly could to do the things that they wanted to do? Or do you want to be the person that said, it was too hard, couldn't be bothered. Now I feel like I wish I'd done that. You know what I mean? So I'm kind of just like, want to be around women who want to try to do the best they can in life, make mistakes, because we all do. I make mistakes all the time, but just try to be the best version, best mom, but do the best things, fail. And when you fail and when things don't work out the way that we hope, because even having a vaginal birth doesn't mean that like you're not going to get like this holy grail that comes down. You might end up having it didn't work out perfectly. My birth wasn't perfect. I still had postpartum hemorrhage and retained placenta. There's feelings and emotions that come with those things, but we're there to support you after that. And it's really about women uplifting women. And I think that's why you and I connect so well, Liz, is that I think we're on the same page. We just really want to heal the world and heal each other and heal ourselves and just feel loved and be in community and maybe eventually get naked and dance around a fire when we get down that path, of the witch ways and, but I just, yeah, I just really want to be with women like that. So if you're that kind of woman, come in the VBAC village, come and join us and come and join our tribe. And look, if you're more mainstream, that's cool too, because we're not really woo-woo crazy on that horse. I'm sitting in the middle.
Ashley, I love you, and I'm so grateful for, what I call our friendship. And I think I'm really blessed to be able to just know you and be in the presence of you, and to say that I've had you very intimately a part of my just journey. Like you said, it's not just birth, it's just life, and who knows where it'll take us. But thank you for being here. And again, guys,
Thank
all
you
her
for
stuff
having
is
me. Thank you.
yes, all her stuff is in the show notes. I'll do that in the closeout. But all right, I'll see you next time.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. And if you want to work with Ashley, make sure to check the show notes to access her website, follow her on Instagram, explore her podcast, and all the other ways that she can support you in your birth or postpartum journey. Make sure to subscribe to the show before you leave, and we will see you guys next time. Bye.